Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's exciting webinar about scaling your CMI function in an increasingly complex world, including, of course, and not the least, the role of leadership engagement in this all. Your cameras and microphones are turned up, so we won't be able to see you, but on the right-hand side, there is a chat available, and we strongly encourage you to stay active in the chat. We do have a Q&A session at the end, but I will go into the chat and I will try and figure out which ones are questions. So keep them coming throughout this session so that we can return to them at the end. Without further ado, I have the honor to welcome our two prestigious speakers. First of all, Carsten, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Melina. Hello, everyone. My name is Carsten. I'm responsible for our enterprise sales function here at Valona. And I've been doing this for some years now. My journey at the company has started roughly 20 years ago when I was one of the many co-founders. I brought in my own research and intelligence business into the previous version of Valona, so to say. I was one of the many co-founders, so it was a truly global organization that we founded back then. Before that, I was, like I said, running my own company, research consultancy, and originally I started in a management consulting company. So I look back to actually 30 years of experience working with a lot of leaders, business users, intelligence professionals all the time on projects, consulting projects, research projects, but also implementing intelligence platforms, obviously, and exchanging best practices on that topic. So I'm super happy to talk exactly about this topic today, to really improve the decision-making process, to connect leadership and CMI professionals even better. And today I'm really super happy to do this together with Shaun, who is a very smart person in this domain. And interestingly, I have met you just some weeks ago as a colleague when Valona merged with A Insights. But the fun fact is that we know each other for, I guess, 10 years. And we've been working together and debating a lot on these topics all the time. So over to your introduction, Shaun.
Hi, my name is Shaun Wilken. I'm the Strategic Solutions Specialist at A Insights. And Carsten, although I'm a new colleague of yours, I've got 20 years experience with Valona and with A Insights, 10 years each as a customer. So it's kind of weird feeling very new, but at the same time still feeling very experienced with these two companies. Carsten, in preparation for this webinar, I thought to myself, in the 10 years we've known each other, MI or CMI has actually changed quite considerably in that time. And I think it's really great to be here today with you to be discussing that. Me personally, I come from the food industry. I've had a career of moving backwards or upstream up the food value chain over many years, and 10 years of that in market intelligence and strategic intelligence. And what a pleasure to be here with all of you today. Thank you very much for joining us. So where do we begin? We start with a problem statement, and with all of our focus on 2026 and what is coming up ahead of us. We used to say things like, today is the slowest day of the rest of your life. That in 2025 is really true. We see this with the escalation, with the acceleration of the market. And the amount of change that we're seeing today is probably going to be the least change that we'll see for the rest of our lives as well. And this is something to get ready for. Unless you think that 2026 is going to be business as usual, my view is that it's not going to be business as usual. It'll be quite disruptive. But rather than take my anecdotal view on this, perhaps what we can do is actually just judge the audience response to this. So please, if you would go to the poll, we'd like to ask you the question: do you think that 2026 will be business as usual, or will it not be business as usual? So Melina, are we in the poll?
The poll should be on your chat up top right.
Excellent. Nice to see everybody passing comments already. And I'll actually mention some of those comments in the material today as well. So how are we doing on responses? We've got 36 people on the call. Melina, how many responses have we got so far?
We're at 21 votes, so getting there. I can add the answers to the stream.
Absolutely not. 32%, unlikely 32%. So less than 10% think that it is going to be business as usual. I think that's a pretty good figure. I'd be very curious to know from that 8% that said mostly yes, what they're doing and how they are averting all of the disruption that we're facing. So let's have a look and see why we think that 2026 will not be business as usual. And that's because our operating environment is getting a lot more turbulent. And the acronym that I like to use for this is VUCA. And what does that mean? It means it is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now, there's also two other ways to see that. One is called tuna, which is what I learned with you, Carsten, in the benchmarking circles at Valona over the last 10 years. And now there's a new idea called Barney. And Matthias on the comments, this next slide is just for you. So whether it's tuna, VUCA, or Barney, as far as I'm concerned, it's not really that important. If aliens are attacking, you need to get ready. And the color of their spaceship is not the key thing that you need to be looking at. So the disruption is coming, and whether we call that tuna or VUCA or Barney, we need to deal with that disruption. So looking at that disruption and not going into this point for point in detail, because I think all of us are well aware, but the key insight on this page is that all of this is happening in the 2020s. So our decade has started off extraordinarily disruptive. Pandemic into the inflation cycle and all the things that happened. Now we're busy dealing with AI. We're dealing with a very dense regulatory environment that seems to be splitting in two, long-term, short-term. And trade is getting really noisy with free trade agreements, bilateral agreements, multilateral agreements. It's getting very, very complicated. And this is affecting our supply as well, and technology being the key driver here. Now, a thought on this page is that each picture on this page represents a deep dive or ongoing analysis for the CMI function, just purely in this decade. So these issues were not really there in 2019. These are 2020 onwards issues. And this is putting a lot of pressure on the CMI function to be able to perform. And trying to use 2019 solutions in 2026, you're not going to deal with scale or volume. So if you look at it from a different perspective, all of these issues are just bringing more business risk towards us from different angles that we haven't seen before. And this is what is expanding our scope and our workload. But at a crucial moment, this is when we need time to be able to dive into ad hoc, where we need to be able to dive into deep dives and see what's going on. But we're too busy reporting, and we're too busy trying to deal with the disruption that we have. So 2019 ways of working are not going to set you up for success. It's time to reframe this and to have a completely different look at what we're doing, because not only has the market changed and all these issues that are coming towards us, but these issues are affecting, let's say, 4 of the key pillars of CMI, right? So the market itself is volatile. AI is driving CMI tools through the roof. And in between, you've got leadership and CMI that are trying to deal with these changes at speed. It's like running and playing chess at the same time. So does it all balance out? And the sad reality on this is not really. Market volatility is up, CMI tooling is up, leadership and CMI are still kind of working at a 2019 rhythm, and that's not ideal. So the purpose of today's webinar is to look at this relationship and redress it and reframe it and see how we can set ourselves and specifically our CMI functions and leadership up for success. So either we do things the same way we've been doing them for years, or we change them and we change the dynamic and we look for new solutions and find better synergy in terms of what we're doing. So everything up until now that I've said has been quite anecdotal. It's been my perspective from the CMI role. But I think we need to look at this in a more scientific perspective. Carsten, how do you see the diagnosis?
Yes, very interesting observations. I share them a lot, so I can confirm that this is what we see in when we discuss with customers. The challenges are there. As an interesting fact, this is not just intuition or observation from the field, but this is also empirically proven, as we as Valona have done the research for 20 years. So we are asking CMI professionals, but also leaders and business users, stakeholders overall, how they perceive intelligence in their organization. And that data is very unique because this gives an idea of how good looks like and what are the issues, what is the current state of the function itself. And over the time, as we do this for 20 years now, we can really see some of the trends that you've just described. And without going too theoretical or empiric, I'm just trying to share a little bit what we found out with this latest research. So the global survey that we have done has just been recently published, and the results are super fresh still. And I will share this in a second. So if you look at this framework, you can see that there are dots in the middle, and this exactly says that many companies, or the average, sits really still in the middle, and you can say they are really stuck in the middle because this picture does not really change over the years. There's always a huge gap towards what good really looks like. If you look at the right-hand side, we will explain the framework a bit in a minute, but you just see that there's a lot of room for improvement towards world-class intelligence. And we will discuss how this can be achieved, and especially what the role of leadership engagement is in all those levels. So what I would like to do right now is just share a little bit the basic survey results, especially as far as they relate to scaling up intelligence based on the engagement with leadership. So basically 3 key results we found. Like we have already seen, most companies are really stuck in the middle. You've seen the picture before. The average is in the middle, but also more than half of the companies really feel that they are in the middle of the journey, and there are lots of shortcomings. And also we have discussed this not only with CMI professionals, but we have also asked the leaders and business users, and they have also, majority has actually expressed concerns that they are not super happy with what they get from CMI. So there is a real problem. Also the empirical research supports this. Why this is, one of the reasons is obviously that the scope, as you described it, Shaun, is ever expanding, and CMI teams, in spite of all the achievements like to bring in automation, experiment with AI, and a lot of hard work, it is still too much to cover. The scope is ever expanding. You need to buy even more data. You need to process more raw data. And the irony of this is, of course, that you have even less time to come up with the so what and the what now. And this is not a surprise that the leaders per se, that they are not necessarily super happy with what they get. So potentially, what do world-class companies do different? This is, of course, the question. And in a nutshell, you can say they invest even more, a little bit more in technology. But what is even more, I think they spend more efforts on the actual analysis. So they flip around this 80-20 rule. So they really manage to put an 80% of the emphasis to the analysis and not the data collection. What is more concerning even at the end is that most companies are not really measuring the benefit of intelligence. And it's exactly in this situation, this is of course poison if you would like to get more resources, budgets, and want to kind of get more recognition in the organization. So this is in a nutshell what we've seen from the results. And the question is now, when you, as the audience, when you feel like you are somehow in this situation, that you're stuck in the middle, what can you do? And the good news is there's something that you can do and that we can do to support you as well. So there's basically three things that I would like to go through in on a high level. So three things: if you look at your current situation and do an honest assessment, and you can invite your leaders to participate in this exercise, you can get a good understanding of where you sit currently in this framework. And then the next step is to establish a roadmap where you would like to really eliminate those gaps that you have identified. And then over time, you also need to check the progress and do some benchmarks. And we will do this a bit now in the next slide, which shows the success factors in one view. We will very quickly go through, and I will show this slide, which shows what this actually means. So the 6 success factors, these are basically the screws that you can work with in order to develop your intelligence. And the beauty of this is that this is an isolated way to handle a complex topic. So if you focus on the scope or the focus of what you're actually monitoring, if you just look at this question, and you do not need to talk about deliverables or processes, but just what are you actually monitoring? This enables you to really focus on this particular points and make sure if this aligns with leadership expectations. Does this align with the complexity of your world? Is this the right balance of, backwards and forward looking? Is it the right balance in depth and breadth of the topic? Because you cannot monitor all the topics of the world in much detail. So you need to do a decision, you need to prioritize. So the scope and the focus is one of the key exercises you need to have a look at. The next thing to look at is how the structure of this whole intelligence looks like. So what are the skills? What are the resources, obviously? Where does it sit in the organization? So in the organizational chart, in the org chart. It is, of course, an observation that, yes, intelligence functions increasingly sit under the sea level, which is a good news, but this does not necessarily mean that there is intimacy. So sometimes there is proximity, so they are close, but this does not mean that you are also part of the or within the room where the decisions are actually made, right? Looking at the process, this is very important point here. Where does the intelligence and where do the insights feed into actual decision making? If this is not synchronized, there's something wrong, and the outcome would be that leadership does not get what they expect. So there need to be a synchronization, for example, to QBRs or annual strategy circles or something like this, and you need to understand where this is. Tools, technologies, of course, Shaun, you mentioned this. This is no brainer. This is very important and key success factor for intelligence. It is not just a platform, but it is all sorts of tools. And the question, how do you integrate those tools? So a topic on its own, definitely. Then we have the deliverables. This is all about the output. How do you transport the insights? Is it PowerPoint, Excel, or is it maybe even something like a briefing or some kind of piece of recommendation even, right? It can vary a lot, and there are lots of options that you need to also discuss with your leaders. Last but not least, this is about the culture. This is not the easiest thing to change, but there are some ways to get a better mindset and more adoption in the organization. And this is, of course, also the topic of today, because this is the foundation. If you establish a culture, and if your leaders are establishing a culture and help establishing a culture of recognition and adoption, then you will have an easier journey than without leadership. So this is it in brief, and if you're interested in this, you can read it in the report. But now we have a question to the audience, and that is something that I would like to ask everyone. So we talked about these 6 key success factors. So which screw, if you will, would you like to turn in order to move the needle in your organization? What is the bottleneck, or where would you like to focus on, or what do you think is the issue? Maybe we can activate the poll.
The
Melina?
poll is active and up in the right-hand chat side of the chat, so please head to your chat to put in your vote. While we're waiting for the poll answers, we have one question in the chat related to this 80% from Matteo asking, does the 20% include primary intelligence? Gonna ship that over to Carsten.
The 20% was referring to actually the time that you spend on analyzing and socializing the output of your work, whereas the 80% is the collection and processing the data. So it does not necessarily refer to the methodology. So if you think about primary, I would put it into the 80% because it's definitely not part of the 20% at the end of the day. I'm not sure if this answers your question. Feel free to come again.
Perfect. We also have 27 votes that have come in, so we could look at the results.
There we see. Very interesting. So it's quite divided. Interestingly, tools, technologies, this is not a surprise that this is the main screw to turn or to move the needle, interestingly, but also focus, also culture, and also deliverables. And interestingly, the process itself is seen not as the predominant variable to work with, even though, of course, where the intelligence feeds in the decision-making is a key question. But this is an interesting result. And just as a spoiler, I would already now say that during the rest of this session, we would be able to demonstrate that these factors are not, I mean, they are interrelated to each other, obviously, right? So, and the basis and foundation of all that is basically the leadership support and leadership engagement. So I will conclude this part with one visual impression of how this works. Once you have identified where you sit on the key success factors, you can decide, okay, we have seen we are intermediate, we would like to get to advanced, and what is the timeline that is realistic? Will we manage to do this within half a year, or does it take us a year or two to get to this level? You can think about ambition levels, time plans, action plans, and all this together with leadership, ideally, to get the buy-in. Right? So now I would like to hand over to Shaun for, again, more practical elements for a solution that have helped other customers and that we can share in this context. So over to you, Shaun.
Thank you very much, Carsten. So if I can put today in context, and where about 30% of you are now saying tooling is what you need, I'm hoping that in 12 minutes time that perhaps you have a different perspective on this. And today I'm not standing here with material that is just conceptual. This entire session is really based on my own experience with many great managers over the years, but one absolutely phenomenal manager or director in the past that really understood what it meant to feed the CMI function and to get that synergy with the CMI function. So Jos Duursma, if you're on this call, this entire webinar is a love letter to you, and hopefully we can copy paste what you and I did into other CMI leadership roles. So not everything is as ideal as you'd want it to be. And if I have to look at how typically I see the CMI function, and this is from roundtables in the past, this is at MI conferences, and whereas best practice is up on the screen, what gets discussed at the coffee table is just worst practice all the time. And the CMI function is not set up for success everywhere. And the way that I would see this is a pantomime. So it's a fixed script between leadership and CMI. And every year we do the same things in the same cycle, we make the same jokes and the audience responds at the same time, but it's very, very fixed. And if you change the story, there's chaos afterwards. Now, trying to do this in 2026 with a 2019 script is not ideal. And this is where I think we can completely reframe this dynamic. And the example I want to use is Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. And what I've realized in preparation for this webinar is that many of our younger colleagues have no idea who these people are. So these are probably the most famous dance pair out of the 1950s and 60s. And when somebody asked Ginger what she thought of the partnership, she said, well, I did everything that Fred did, but backwards and in high heels. And this kind of makes me think of the CMI function in the same way. So, you know, we're kind of mirroring leadership, but doing it backwards and with recommendations based on data. And that makes this kind of an unbalanced pairing between the two. So how do we change that? How do we find syncopation and rhythm between these two functions to make both functions better? And starting off just with a hierarchy and the idea that everything comes top down, and that whatever comes top down, you need to respond to, as opposed to a partnership where you are feeding each other the whole time. Now, in this hierarchy, the CMI function, and this is from many conversations at market intelligence conferences, I've spoken to people at very large companies with well-developed CMI functions that move from marketing to finance to business development to supply chain, and they're moving all the time. And what's even worse is some of them don't even have the right job description. So they might be called business intelligence, they might be called something else that doesn't really show you what their function is. And it's not about job titles, it is about expectations from stakeholders. So how do we bring a new vitality to this very, very important partnership in CMI? And this is where we get back to the dance. And this is where it's one is the leader and the other one follows. But if you've danced with your partner, you know that that's not really the case. It's sort of mutual leadership and mutual following, and it's in line, and there's rhythm to this. Now, we could talk about this all day, or we could look at 3 examples of how you can put these two functions together to create things that have value to the organization, that are going to give you the best insights and foresights in 2026 when you really, really need it. So let's have a look at that for a second. And let's start off with scale by design. Now, this is where I'm going to do a dirty trick and say to you that scale by design, we've actually been working on for a very, very long time. And with the new Valona North Star release and the new A-Insights portal, the idea here is to immediately give you scale, right? So if you look at your insights pyramid, where at the top, you're giving foresights and recommendations, and at the bottom is just data, and then sort of low-lying deliverables. In the 2 new portals, a lot of these low-level deliverables will be on tap for you. So 1 or 2 clicks away, and you can get a SWOT analysis, you can get company profiles, you can get a battle card, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and there'll be more over time. So the thinking in this is to uplift the CMI and say, well, we'll do your dirty work for you. Your portal will do the dirty work for you, giving you more time to focus on what's important. And that is keeping leadership happy and answering their questions and making sure that you have the right material at the right time. Now, with all of this extra time, please consider that you still need to scale a hell of a lot more and use this time constructively that we're giving back to you with our portal. On top of that, we'll also suggest to you that work with your leadership on your CMI branding. So why is branding important? Because branding is trust. When you buy a product, the brand is what you trust, and you know the ingredients are right. So having a very, very clear branding for your CMI function extends that trust out of the presentation room and into where those insights actually start to become operational. Then when we were in Berlin in October and we had a World Cafe workshop, there were some phenomenal ideas that were shared. So thank you to all of you that shared ideas. One that I really want to take out comes from the chemical company Evonik. And this is where they tell us that they have 2 benchmarking days with leadership before any strategy round or any planning round. And in those 2 days, what they do is they immerse their leadership in market context. So they show key metrics from the market dynamics, competitor moves, and really entrench their stakeholders in the market context before starting the strategy round. Now, I hear all of you, and there's no comments about this yet, but the idea of taking leadership away for 2 days and just hitting them with market insights sounds like a luxury that very, very few of us have. Here's my challenge back to you. Without this, you're probably going to spend weeks and months trying to catch up with ideas that are not relevant to the time frame. So maybe some leadership have ideas in their head from 2015 or 2019 or even before. Refreshing that really sets you up for a good strategy session where everybody's talking the same language and has the same understanding of what's happening in the market. So to all of the leaders on this call, please consider spending that time and putting that investment of time in with your CMI function to be able to reap the rewards with better strategy and better strategy implementation later. And probably having a more aligned process all the way through. So it's front-loading strategy to get better results out, even if that feels like a big cost at the beginning. Now, I've gone and spoken through the 3 slides. Melina, thank you so much for preparing them. Carsten, please, if you would continue.
Sure, Shaun, thank you. So I think that was really well balanced to get some examples that have really worked in reality. And just to summarize a little bit where I came from. So I think it is very important to understand where you are currently, what the issues are. Is there a gap to leadership? Is there is there an assessment that you can do in self-assessment? Also invite your internal stakeholders to have a clear diagnostic of where you stand. You can use the framework and the success factors, and you will identify the bottlenecks very easily. Second thing is, based on that knowledge, you can establish your own roadmap, and please engage your leadership to take part into this discussion. Can be projects, workshops, or these kind of things. And then you need to benchmark the context. Maybe you can benchmark with your peers, or you exchange with your peers, or you just look at the survey that we do every 2 years to benchmark yourself with global average. And then most importantly, with everything you do in this context, there needs to be this focus on leadership, partnership. That is where I came from, where Shaun came from. And on the next slide, we have summarized this also as a kind of synthesis from what Shaun has experienced from his practice, and also like combining it with this framework that we have shown. And it just shows that it is really a pragmatic system. Shaun, can you describe this a bit? Because these are the 3 examples that you just went through: scale by design, branding, and benchmarking. And we can allocate them basically to the success factors very nicely.
So the 2 success factors line up perfectly with this. So scale by design, if Valona and A Insights are giving you more of your low-level deliverables at the touch of a button, you can spend more time on organization and scaling the rest of your insights, your proprietary insights through that organization. On branding, you're using deliverables to drive culture, and you're using your unique market intelligence or CMI brand, and be creative, have absolute fun with this, because it's only going to be used internally. But this represents trust that then when it filters down through the culture, is vital, especially now in 2025, when all of us are not just using ChatGPT or other LLMs, but also competing for our stakeholders' attention with exactly these. And I think it's become more and more and more important to understand where your insights are coming from. Is it coming from good data that's gone through an AI, or is it going through an AI that is hallucinating and making up information as they go along? And then on the benchmarking, it's creating this process that delivers focus. And I can't remember how many of you were saying focus was your key priority. I think it was about 30%. So using that benchmarking opportunity to basically get 1 + 1 = 3. Carsten?
Yeah. Again, this framework, in order to show you how you can practically work with this. Once you have discussed where you sit in each of those dimensions, you remember the screws that you see that they are more or less relevant to describe your existing service and your ambition level that you're trying to achieve. Once you have plotted your dots on this map, you can think about what you would like to achieve. And with all these factors, believe me, there's, like Shaun has demonstrated, there's a lot of leadership, collaboration and co-ownership that is needed in order to develop focus, to develop organization, to develop process, tools. Obviously, if you do not do the right business cases with leadership, they will not recognize, is it just for efficiency or is it for more growth? Is it for risk avoidance? And the same with everything, like, of course, the culture. If leadership is not dancing the CMI tango or whatever dance you would like to do, then of course it does not work as a foundation. So that was basically what we would like to give to you as a tool to work and to use. And I think, Shaun, you can conclude the meeting with one interesting observation as well.
So this is the so what moment, right? This is the so what moment. So with all of the priorities that leadership has in 2026 and the things that are really important to you, why should you spend time on uplifting one specific function above the rest? And that is because your CMI function is not a 1x function. At best, it's probably a 2x function. Well, at worst, it's a 2x function. At best, it could be 100 or 1,000x function. So whatever you put into that comes out multiplied on the other side. And the idea of leadership just being a passive business sponsor, it's not enough. It's not enough. The market is too volatile. The conditions are too volatile. Leadership, we need your buy-in to raise this roll up and give you 10x plus on that roll. But it comes from that partnership and working together on that to boost it and elevate it. And this is a role that drives innovation. This is a role that drives commercial competitiveness and is always finding opportunities and threats to grow business. So my request to all of you today is, please, this is a plea to all of you. Let's work better together. Let's take each other by the hand and make each other better in terms of what we do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone in the chat for being active. It's time to ramp up that activity because it's the Q&A session. So please, any questions into the chat, and we'll answer them. To get things rolling and to warm up the audience, maybe I can throw in a question. I am a CMI professional and I would like to improve my relationship with leadership. But I want to do it right now after this webinar. What's the first thing I do after leaving the webinar?
Melina, there's an African proverb that says, rather light a candle than curse the darkness. And what I find is the most practical way to solve any problem is actually just walking up to somebody and telling them exactly what it is that you want from them. And I think specifically leadership and leadership personality styles, you know, they want things to the point. They need to understand what is being asked for, and actually just being explicit and saying, I want to do better for the company, but for me to do better for the company, I need you to help me.
Perfect.
That makes it further.
I have a question that has come in.
Can I respond to one of the questions that's been hanging for some time in the chat? Matthias again asks, aren't things by definition right when they come top down? Matthias, it's 2025. You've got a Google prompt. Perhaps you should just have a look and see what is happening globally. And are we still assuming that leadership are superhumans that don't make any mistakes? or if there's always that factual support that's needed to help leadership to get better understanding of what's needed. Irony.
A
Yes.
very relevant question coming in from Nicholas. How do you convince a circle of top managers that have been 30 plus years in the business and believe they know everything? Go ahead, Carsten.
Agree with them. Agree with them and tell them that their knowledge and their experience is vital for 30 years ago, but things have changed in between. And this is where they're right, but they're not right enough. And let's not focus on where they're right. Let's focus on where they're not right enough and build that piece up.
Carsten, do you have anything to add?
I was thinking about this. So with 30 years of experience, of course, they will ideally recognize that there will be change. I'm not sure about the vertical where this is, but there's change everywhere. So if they are also adjusting to this change, then it's fine. And like I said, you probably not controversial, but really be collaborative and challenging them at times and showing like examples or gaps, like blind spots. And I think that's probably an educational process in a way.
Let's take one more. Engaging leadership up front is one, but how do you succeed in keeping them engaged?
Effectively, the CMI role is a performer, and you're only as good as your last performance. And the way to keep them engaged is that once you've put that deliverable in place, and the first time that you ever put a deliverable in place, the weird thing is everybody looks back at you and says, this is wrong. And this sends us into this collapse of self-doubt until we realize that the first time that you put anything in front of somebody, people look at it and they say, it's wrong, right? So you need to get through that step and then keep on delivering according to those expectations, and make it novel, make it interesting, and make it relevant.
One thing we also notice is that it is not obviously God-given that leadership would accept also opinion or recommendation. Most of them just really want the facts, right? They want the facts and maybe a PowerPoint, of course, but it is also now a plea to leaders. If you are open to also receive opinions and recommendations, that can, of course, also help CMI team to step up a bit more. And often they are willing, but I hear so often that leadership is not necessarily requiring or asking this kind of piece of advice at the end of the day.
Thank you, Shaun.
Then again, we're using terms like leadership and CMI very, very, very broadly. Whereas the truth is no two CMIs are the same and no two managers or directors are the same. So it's always catering for those different personalities, different personality types, different preferences for ingesting information. And we need to cater for a very broad variety of people in doing this.
Thank you, Carsten, and thank you, Shaun, for this lovely conversation. And thank you to everyone in the audience for engaging and for taking the time to listen. If you have not yet read the Global Intelligence Report, I've just put a pop-up, a direct link to the report. So no need to fill in any forms, just click on the link and you'll get the report straight away. Thank you for joining. And see you next time on one of our joint webinars, probably next time around as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melina. Thank you, audience.